This week on Thriving on Mission.
Until you start seeing that, your spouse is hurting and potentially struggling with some things. And it took me a while to figure out that I couldn't fix it for him.
And so when our husbands come home and we know that in some way they're broken, because you can't go through that and not be broken. We're trying to do what we can to take care of our husbands, and unfortunately we end up enabling them to stay right where they're at, as opposed to dealing with the dark stuff that you got to deal with, because there is no way around a problem. There's only a way through. That's it.
When you spend half your marriage apart and each of you are changing along the way, you do have to kind of spend some time getting to know each other again.
How are my conflict solving skills?
No answer.
Okay.
I'm not going to answer that.
Smart.
Hey, welcome back to Thriving on Mission. I'm the host, Matt Rogie, and we are here now for episode 12. And as always, I'm with producer Quinn Harris. What's up, Quinn? What's up? And we're here at City Church in their studio. And again, we're so thankful to be able to come here and to do this show. So just recap from last week. If you haven't listened to this episode, I really encourage you to check it out. It's with interview with a Night Stalker, Andre, or he goes by Dre Hansen, and he was a crew chief in the unit with me and some others for a few years. And Dre is an incredible man, and he shares an incredible story of being in the military, going through some traumatic experiences, and just been processing that now and what that looks like for him in his life right now. So again, just check that out. And you're going to hear more about Dre as we go on, but, and again, great episode for that one. So before we get started for this week, just want to bring up, this episode, I'm actually going to release a day early. So for those that are like, wait, this is Monday, and I just wanted to release this episode on Memorial Day. We know that, this is the day that, or most people, maybe they don't, I don't know. Memorial Day is the day that, we come together as a nation to honor the fallen. And so today being May 25th of when it's released, and again, just want to use that as a reminder to honor all those that have gone before us, the men and women who have served in the military and died. So just take a time, a few minutes maybe today to remember them. All right. So for today's show, I mentioned last week, I had something really special in store. And for today, we have two incredible guests. So this is a first for us, two guests, and we're excited about that. So one of them I know really well. And the other one I know pretty well, but obviously I know one really well, super well. So I'm excited to have them both on. And so just to let the cat out of the bag, I've got both my wife and a very good friend of my wife and mine. She's actually the wife of Tim. Tim's been on the show before a couple times. And so, want to welcome, to my wife, Stacie. Say, hey, Stacie.
Hey.
Glad she's here today. And then also for Lisa Denton. Glad you're here with us.
Hi.
So, as the show's been going on and we've been talking, and I know, we've, even before the show started, for both, Stacie and Lisa, there have been conversations back and forth about, our stories collectively as a family, as the military, but also as believers. And again, just how all this, junk has sort of unfolded in our laps. Obviously lots of good stuff too, but, I was mentioning before the show started today is the fact that, it was after even I think my first episode that Stacie, you received a message from somebody, a friend of ours, a mutual friend, another spouse. And what she said, something to the effect of she just gotten remarried, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And she married a veteran who was suffering with post-traumatic stress.
Yes.
Right. And the fact that she was struggling because of that, I think. And she just found some
Absolutely.
encouragement, in this. And that really struck me because, again, I can speak, I think, a lot to veterans. But, the reason I want to have both of you on today is to sort of speak to that other side of the equation. Because, there's lots of great resources out there for the veterans. And there are great resources out there for the spouses as well, I think, for veterans. But at the same time, it can also, if we can spend this episode, maybe we can bring some hope and some encouragement to others that are searching for it right now. So as we get started, Stacie, the listeners know a little bit about our story already, of course, of how I don't think they know how we met, but, which is a funny story in of itself, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But with that, why don't you just sort of talk about, if we'll start with you, Stacie, and just sort of talk about how, this transition occurred in your life, and as far as, being married to the military, and when did sort of this idea of mortality hit you, specifically with me and that type of thing?
Well, adjusting to the military was in and of itself a feat. I'd grown up around a military base, and I worked in a financial institution with many military members, so I knew the military a little bit, but I wasn't married to it. And after we got married, I learned about all the training and all of the stuff that go along with it, the going out to different places in the desert to like stateside to do training and stuff like that. But ultimately, the reality of mortality was after 9/11.
Yeah.
And just what ifing it and thinking about what does this mean for you and for our family. We have, at that point, he was 4,
I think so,
almost
yeah.
4-year-old son, and what is this going to look like? And I could lose my husband, and what happens with all of that. And so, yeah, it was a pretty rough introduction to that. So.
Do you remember, did you and I talk about that much?
Which part? Just
the things that you were having to deal with and struggle with?
Not a lot.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I don't think we did either. Because I was definitely on the high of I'm in the 160th, and I was doing really incredible stuff and excited, and but I think that's important to realize, and again, because I really wasn't aware of it.
Yeah.
So I'll just say that. So Lisa, sort of the same question to you. When did your introduction to the military / this idea of, mortality and really what the ultimate cost could be, when did that come to you?
I think it was probably after Tim and I had been married, and now I was integrated into the process of like the paperwork and things like that happened before deployment. We were having to think through wills, all those kinds of things. And it was just almost like dinner table conversation for us after a point, because we just talked about it so often. But you did have to think through, okay, if he doesn't come home, what's going to happen? And, you just couldn't help but think it through to that point. But I think probably the real event that kind of made everything sink in that it could truly happen to my husband was probably one of the first major incidents that happened overseas in March of 2002. When for a while there, we didn't know who was involved, and we were just kind of watching the news and wondering. I think that was the first time that it was really scary and truly hit home. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny, not funny, I guess, but, whenever dates come up, and I think we can all realize the fact, and again, I think every episode now, somebody has brought up the fact that, a date, and there's so many dates that we have in our minds now.
Yeah.
And most of them are not related to good things.
Yeah.
There were a lot of things that would happen in the news, and especially the communication back then was just very poor. So obviously the deployments continued. There was definitely challenges that went along. For all of us. 2005 was both an incredible year in some ways, right?
Right. It was.
But also a very tragic year, And I want to, and just briefly, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but Lisa, could you talk a little bit about, the sort of the events leading up to the first part of 2005 in March and just.
Yeah, sure. I was pregnant with my first daughter, Delaney. And the end of 2004, I was about 5 months pregnant and just was having a lot of pain and problems. So ultimately found out that I had a large ovarian tumor that ultimately ruptured. And when we did the surgery to remove it and everything, we did find out that it was ovarian cancer. And from there, just had to be careful. I did start some chemotherapy, but carefully. And then when Delaney was due in March, we went ahead and planned a C-section with full cancer staging and everything on her birthday, March 17th. And thankfully, everything went great. She came along without any problems. And it wasn't an easy time. I was still going through chemotherapy and obviously just not feeling great. But thankfully, I really feel like both myself and Delaney are miracles of God, that we both survived and that we're both now thriving and doing well. And even now, 15 years later, Delaney's 15, I can say that I'm officially cured, and she's doing great. Yeah. So that was a hard time, but also, obviously I realized a very good time, a blessed time that we did have the outcome that we did, because not everyone does.
Sure.
So we do feel very blessed for sure.
Yeah, it's an incredible story of, you're right, of God's grace and, and just now to look at her now, just, it's incredible, absolutely incredible. And we're thankful to be a part of that too. And in case anybody didn't pick up on that, that's St. Patrick's Day she was born in, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So every year for 15 years, Savannah has held a parade in her honor.
That's right.
Except this year.
Oh, yeah. Ooh, that's right.
She didn't get a parade this year.
Good point. Yeah, so no parade this year for her. But the other thing I was thinking about, because I remember that day, and when you were, we were waiting for you to come back out of surgery, you were still in recovery, and Corey was there as well that day.
He was. He sure was. Just those little memories that we can have still of Corey, because then he left if I remember right, about 5 weeks later is when he went ahead and deployed. And that was the last time that Lori got to see him as well. Right.
And then of course, June 28th, just a couple months later, he ended up getting killed. So, but I mean, just what a blessing for him to be able to be there as well for that.
It was. We still have that photo of everyone that was there, and we always are thankful that Corey was there, and that was the last time that I saw him.
Yeah. So for both of you, either one of you can sort of pick up this one. So, again, I know now looking back what those deployments and the things that I would start to get into this habit and this routine of not necessarily good stuff, of how there would be this window of time frame to where I'm sort of normal at home, but either when I was just coming back from a deployment or getting ready to go, I would change. Talk about, how did you feel? How did you deal with that? Or did you not deal with it? I don't know. But again, there's probably still people out there who are going through this right now. Mm-hmm. And, and I think, to share your stories a little bit on that. Either one.
Okay. Well, I know that prior to every deployment, you would go into mission mode, getting everything prepared, making sure you had everything, you had trained for this. This wasn't something that you just had to guess about. Do I need that? Do I not need that? All that. You knew what you needed. You had a checklist and you got everything ready. So I just kind of knew to stand back and let you do your thing. But it also meant that there was a transition going on for me as well, insofar as, okay, he's going forward. Now I'm going to pick up the responsibilities that he's been doing here. And it might be a surprise, but Matt is the financial wizard in our family. And so taking on the checkbook was always very daunting for me, but it was something I did. I kind of got into mission mode too, to know what I was going to have to do, because at least we had 8 deployments. So, it was every time I kind of knew this is what was going to happen. And then after he would deploy, I became mom and dad and the accountant and the shopper and all those things that we used to partner with and do. So that was, an adjustment, but you just do it. I like to say that, like, it took about 3 weeks for me to get in the routine of not having him beside me in bed when we went to bed. So that was always an adjustment. And then, we communicate. I would do my best to keep everything situated back home so he didn't have to focus on anything but the mission ahead, so that he could stay as safe as possible. And that was my mission when he was on mission. And then when he would come home, that was pretty interesting, because I'd had the responsibilities of everything for a certain amount of time. And then he would come back and, well, to be honest, I was like, here's the checkbook. I don't want it anymore. But I would have to relinquish what I was controlling as 2 parents and allow him to come in and spend time with Nick. But also, every deployment chipped at him. Every single experience. The first deployment, nobody knew how long it was going to go. I think we decided it was 8 months, pretty close to 8 months.
8 or 9.
Yeah, 8 months. We had no idea when they were coming back. And then at the same time, we were fearful for their lives. So, so that was how transitions went for us during deployments. Thankfully, not that we weren't worried, but we kind of got into that routine that it made at least the transition a little easier, doable.
Lisa, what about for you?
It was much the same for us.
Yeah.
I definitely noticed a stress level rising when Tim was starting to pack and get ready to deploy. And then as he would leave, I would definitely get into my busy mode of just a very structured, these are all the things that I take care of while he's gone that will keep my mind off of being so worried. And then, when he would come home, it was also we were basically taught to be gentle and kind of careful in offloading responsibilities, because we didn't want to too much too soon and just kind of, be too much as they were, adjusting to coming back. Mm-hmm. So I guess in a way I sort of was in a protective mode, both before and after, just to, like Stacie said, just allow you guys to be very mission focused and not have to worry about all the things going on at home. Because inevitably every time Tim deployed, something would break at home. It was the car, it was something with the house, something. But, we just, you figure out how to take care of those things and try to alleviate the stress and do the best thing that, that you could to make it so that you guys could focus. And so, yeah, it was pretty similar for most of us girls, I think, especially, having children. Mm-hmm. That's when it became really a lot of responsibility.
Mm-hmm. As you're, as you're both talking through this, and again, just thinking, that's just, part of me, or part of maybe people would hear this and they're going to go, well, obviously that's life, because that's just the way things are working. But at the same time, what I want, and here's a question, I guess, let me ask you this, Lisa, is when did you have a chance to process, though, emotionally what's going on? Because you said, hey, I'm basically just going to, and Stacie, you said it too, I'm going to be on mission. And Lisa, you said, I'm just going to stuff it down or put it aside, the emotions. Or when did you process? When did you deal with, when did you have a time to sit back and go?
That's a great question. I think I'm still doing that now,
Right.
4 years post-retirement.
Right.
Definitely not during the time.
Okay.
Because we were just busy putting one foot in front of the other. But I can say that I am very thankful for my friendships, especially like Stacie and a few others where we're all in the same boat. So we could get together and just talk, understand where the other one is, even if we couldn't truly process, because I just think there's so much to it that you couldn't let your guard down that far, or you might fall apart, and we couldn't afford that, while everything's going on. But honestly, I think once Tim retired and stopped deploying, and that's when the true processing started. But I can say 4 years into it that it's going to be a long process.
Yeah.
And working on it, but not there yet, even now.
Right. Yeah. Just to hear you say that again, it just so people realize, again, a lot of the things you're describing are things that we were doing as well.
Right.
When people are in deployments, because, if you're focused on your mission, and we've talked about, Tim and I have talked about this before, to where night after night, we've got mission after mission. There's no time to sit and process what just happened because there's another mission. And so we need to move on and go. Otherwise, we're going to end up not being able to perform at the level we need to. And, you think about the similarities of what's going on, right? I mean, you guys are carrying this weight that grows and grows and grows.
I'd also like to add that we were trying to keep our children's lives as normal as possible.
Yeah.
Because not only were we dealing with being the temporary, but single parenthood could have possibly been permanent, but dealing with the war and, the fears that come along with that. And so I'd say the only time that I got to ever decompress or kind of work through anything is we have occasions where we get together and the kids would play, and then we could sit around and kind of talk about things with the kids not hearing, and just actually, but I mean, it still pales in comparison to after military, when you really get to walk through a lot of the stuff.
Yeah. Because I know for us, Stacie, for you and I, because I retired 10 years ago. And so, at least you even made mention this, when I asked you to be on the show, the fact that, we've been on this road now for about 10 years. And Lisa, for you and Tim, you guys have been on this road now for 4 years. And then also Tim had, another, 6 years of combat deployments, many more. And so, it does take time and effort. I think we could all agree, with that. But again, I trying to, verbalize for the listeners to understand of what you were experiencing. And now the fact that we're on this other side of it. Well, let me ask you this. Do you think for somebody in the profession that, for me and for Tim that we chose, there could have been any other way to go through combat deployments and knowing what the mission is at hand?
I think you guys it was the best possible path.
Right.
You mean with the training?
Well, I mean, more along the lines of the fact that, because we live in this fallen world and our country was at war and we're required to do these combat deployments. Obviously, we could have said, no, I'm out and left the unit or left the military early. But based upon being in the military, I mean, is there anything that could have been done differently to make life better, knowing that there was always a deployment on the calendar?
I think you take every opportunity when the deployment wasn't happening to spend time and family time together. But as far as mentally and emotionally preparing, that's kind of a double-edged sword, because part of you wants to prepare, or part of you wants to process with your spouse. And then the other part of you wait, he's got to go again. I don't want him to be thinking about my emotional, mental state while he's forward. So just, again, guarded, like Lisa said, to how much I'm willing to, put out there and not stress him out, in addition to the fact that he's preparing for a mission. Yeah. So
I think that's a great question. I don't think I have an answer, but I do think that it would be really hard to be able to stay on mission and perform at the level that you guys had to and still process through everything along the way. I don't think we were designed to live 20 years in combat, even one for that matter.
Right.
And so I don't know how you could continue to function and do those kinds of things where you're in harm's way on a daily basis and still process it and continue to do that. I think it would be a great goal. I really do. Yeah. But I'm not sure how that would work.
Right. Yeah, I think, and again, looking at the two of you as spouses of Night Stalkers, guys with multiple combat deployments, again, looking at you saying that there was probably not any other way other than not being a part of it, and it's almost, it's trite to say it, but it's just a fact of life in a lot of ways because of the choices we make to get there.
Right.
And it's an unfortunate byproduct.
I'd also like to add that because you're geared to be a compartmentalist, even at the level that you guys had to compartmentalize was still unhealthy. Yeah. But, just mission after mission after mission, you had to push it to the next, and you had to leave it in that box. And you couldn't go back in that box right now. You had to move forward. But at some point in time, there has to be an opportunity to come back and circle and deal with what's in that box. And that's where I think the biggest struggle is. I mean, you didn't get to do it no matter how many deployments you had, whether it was 8 or I don't know how many Tim had.
25.
Oh my. Okay, didn't know that. That's a lot. And so in those deployments, and you just keep stuffing it and putting it in that box, then, it's going to come out one way or another. Because we, like Lisa said, we were not meant to do that. No matter how good at compartmentalizing we think we are. So,
yeah. So what does that look like is for the two, for each of you, for Lisa, what did that look like for you now, or even then? Was there ever any feelings of guilt or shame or maybe anger towards the unit, towards the war, towards, really, was there any self lies that you were telling yourself about yourself at that point, or even now, as we're still all processing this at different levels? Are there things that you have to watch? How you see truth now?
I don't know. I think that you get to be really good at just muscling through and doing what you have to do.
Yeah.
And there were plenty of times when I felt like I wasn't as strong, I wasn't as capable, I wasn't as good a mom or as good a wife, military wife, as others, because I did struggle. It was hard, and there were hard days, and you didn't really want to share too much, because anything that we say or do is a reflection on our spouses. And I think most of you guys would agree that just as being men, being military men, being in the 160th, weakness wasn't something that you were going to show. whether you even felt it or not. It was just, I think it was part of who you guys are, that you were strong, you were solid, and nothing got to you. And so we wanted to support you in a similar fashion. And so there was a part of us that felt like, we had to be the same way. So not that we always were, but we did. I think, thankfully there were probably small groups of us that could share, but even still, we were guarded. That word again, but yeah.
I was just thinking, my attitude, the lie I told myself is I can do this. I can do this with success. Like, I just need to pull on my boots, strap them up, and just go and do what needed to be done. And I could do this. I could do this. I'm not going to break. I'm not going to have any problems. I can do this. He's got to stay safe in the field. He needs to know that I am competent enough to take care of the home. I can do this. I can do this. And that was a lie, because I couldn't do it on my own, regardless of whether I let you in on it. I had to have somebody to lean on. That's when, especially right after 9/11, is when my faith had a renewal and became stronger. And that's where I got connected with other faith-believing ladies. And that became a sense of strength and an opportunity for me to let my guard down a little. But it was a little difficult when you knew that somebody else's spouse might be walking through something a little rougher than yours.
Comparing.
Yes.
You start comparing yourself?
I'm like, I don't want to bother them with my baggage, because they're dealing with way more than I'm dealing with. So, but anyway, I had a good facade, but the reality was, I wasn't holding it together.
Yeah. That's interesting you say that about comparing. Both of you agree to that.
Yeah.
Because we do that now. We compare ourselves and say, well, gosh, I never got injured. I never got shot. I was about to say crash an aircraft, but that wouldn't be good.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. But there were different things that, I look at some of the missions that Tim did, or Mike, or anybody, and I say, gosh, I never was on a mission that hard. I was never exposed to those things. And they would probably look at me and say the same thing. And to hear you say the same thing, but a reference to, well, gosh, but I don't know what that wife, what is she going through right now? Her kids are whatever. I mean, there's so many examples, right?
Right. There are. And I think, once you have a close friend whose spouse does not come home, I think from then on, you certainly feel like it could be worse. It could be worse. And you are thankful, but at the same time, you want to be sensitive to the fact that, it could be worse. And I'm still blessed that my spouse is still over there fighting and will come home. And so you all the more want to hold it together, because so far you're one of the lucky ones.
Yeah.
I wanted to add to that too, that denial was a big deal for me, because the unit had not had, at least in our experience with them, had not had a tragedy.
Right. In 3rd Battalion. We had not.
3rd Battalion. We had not. So I'm living in the world of like, they're going to be fine. They're coming back. We're not going to have, nobody's going to die. They know what, they're just great at their job. So I'm in denial that what could happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I was worried, but at the same time over here, I'm like, 3rd Battalion's been fine. We're good.
So after the military, maybe Lisa, you could start with this one. When did you, because again, you've been basically keeping your guard up, this and that. When did you start to realize that, and again, when the guy gets out too, there's a lot of focus on the soldier, right? Here's Veterans Affairs, and there's tons of resources out there. We could have another discussion on how well they work or not, but there's a lot of focus on that, both in the military and then once they get out in the media. But when did you start to see that, hey, man, these last, 16, 17 years, they've taken a toll on me as well. When did you start to see that?
Definitely after retirement. And I think I feel like that's when the big struggle really began for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you can no longer avoid it and you have to start facing it, because Tim didn't go back to work immediately. And so we were around each other a lot, and we were seeing the effects.
Mm-hmm.
It started hitting home for sure.
Yeah. Stacie, what about you? When did you start to see, talking about, for you, when did you start to realize that, hey, there's some baggage or some things that I've been carrying?
I think once we got overseas.
Okay.
When there were no other distractions, but we were trying, our mission at that point was to learn how to live in a foreign country.
Yeah.
So our home is our sanctuary because it's the only thing we can go to that we know what to expect. But outside the door of our home, who knows? But that's when that need to control the situation really came out. And I think it came out for both of us. But just because being out of control was not an option. Like it just, if you're out of control, that's not good. So you've got to maintain control somehow. And I think when we got over there is when we couldn't avoid facing those things that we had to deal.
Yeah. Very similar stories, both of our families, once we retired. Interesting. So what did that look like though? I mean, what did that, because again, I'm the spouse, myself
Mm-hmm.
and Tim, we're battling our own demons at this point, and we still are in some ways, or in a lot of ways. But what does that look like? Because again, you're almost wearing two hats, it seems like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Either one of you want to?
Well, I think for us, I think I had expectations that when Tim deployed, or when Tim was done deploying and was now home full time, that things would be different.
Mm.
And I think it was a rude awakening when I felt like things went from bad to worse. When Tim was flying and on mission, he loved that.
Mm-hmm.
He loved what he was doing. He felt good about what he was doing. And I think that counteracted any of the negative effects that were coming. Yeah. But I think when then he came home full time, and then we had to start facing what life was going to be like post-military, and that transition was a lot harder than we thought. I think that's where the expectations just totally went awry. It was nothing like either of us expected. And, we had planned for, great times when he finally retired and was home and we could make plans and all of this. And then all of a sudden we're miserable a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that was a rude awakening.
Sure. And so at the same time, again, and I think, spouses will say this. I mean, I'll speak for myself, and, I'm dealing with my own things. And again, just because of the way the focus has been, I was not focused on Stacie and what your needs were, what your things that you were struggling with. I mean, I'll be honest,
Mm-hmm.
It was just for whatever reason, and just because I never even thought about some of these things that we're discussing here now, the fact that you've had your guard up for so many years. And because of that, now when we had all this downtime and we were sort of focused to look at it, again, I was blinders on. And I think most guys are probably the same way, because again, it's always it's just what we know. And that's when I say, the fact that you're having to wear two hats at still at this point of still being the supportive wife in a lot of ways, because again, I would imagine for neither one of you, well, I know neither one of you want to see your husband suffer.
Right.
That's probably the hardest thing.
It is.
I think when you've been in the military as long as you guys have, or any time, that's what you know. You've been trained to do this, and in your case, 22 years. You've been trained to be a soldier, 20 of those years you were flying, and that's what you know. And when all of a sudden that's taken from you, and now you've got to find a new identity, well, it becomes really difficult when you come from the background that you come from to slip into that. What does that look like? And I got to say, there was times where when you didn't have confidence in your self-identity. And what I mean by that is you needed a purpose outside of the military. You needed that purpose. And I've never seen you thrive as much as I see you thrive today, because you have found purpose in the last few years in doing what you're doing. And I think anytime you're doing something that you feel like you have a purpose for, it changes a lot of things. So I guess transitioning from the military into retired life, not only does it bring all the things you didn't process with, but now you've got to rediscover yourself and what that looks like. And sometimes it means, just like for us in overseas, it means that some of the tendencies that you had in the military bleed over into what's not military anymore. And I like to say that, just forgive me for this, but we're talking about like the, in our apartment that we lived in, and I talked about that being our sanctuary, but specifically for Matt, because I know, he just came from deployments. He just came from all of that. Was everything had a place, and every place was in its thing before you went to bed. There were no dishes. Everything had to, because that is a symbol of order, right? Well, not giving away too much, but I'm not that ordered. I'm actually pretty messy. So for me during that time, it was a focus on, well, of course we were focusing on Nick and making sure that his life stayed as normal as possible, even overseas, but also was to make sure that I kept Matt's sanity, for lack of a better purpose, to do my part. But it came quickly to my thoughts that I can't do this. It's just like the denial I had before. I can't keep this up, because it's something we got to work through. But that's just one of the things that we went through.
Well, you were still trying to protect me in a lot of ways. And I think, so again, how did that look, Lisa, that you're trying to both still now be the protector in a lot of ways, shield, but at the same time, there's a realization that one, the stakes they are high, don't get me, but not at the same level of hey, he's going to go out on a mission, and so I don't need to burden him with these things. Same thing for you, Stacie. But how does that look? Because again, you're balancing two sets of emotions here, to where generally spouses coming from the military, we're just taking, we're only focused on ourselves because that's all we know at that point. But you've been told all your time, oh, you need to be the strong wife. You need to be the, don't bring any problems to him, right? They would tell you those things in the FRG meetings.
Yes. And
it made sense, I think, in those times. And again, it is what it is. I wish, Lisa, I wish there was a better way, and I hope that they continue to find better ways, to deal with these things. But again, what do you do with that? You've been told all this time, Lisa.
Yeah.
Suck it up.
And you keep doing that. You do keep doing that until you start seeing that, your spouse is hurting and potentially struggling with some things. And it took me a while to figure out that I couldn't fix it for him.
Right.
I could love him, I could support him, I could be there, but there was a whole chunk of what he was going through that he was going to have to work through on his own. And not only was he going to have to do the work, but he was going to have to recognize it and then take the steps. I think I could see things more clearly than he could earlier. And so it was hard. And I know I didn't do this well. as far as just encouraging, I probably pushed some, only because I was ready to move on and reach the good part of retirement. And I'm not him. I think I can empathize as much as I can empathize, but it can only go so far. I was not there. Right. I did not go through that. I'm not in his shoes. And so, figuring out that I could only do so much, and encouraging him to do what he had to do was probably kind of like that shift from trying to do everything and protect him to realizing that I couldn't do everything.
Gotcha. So with that, and again, I the conversation and the words again are very similar between the two, and understandably so. But even here, as I'm listening, and maybe I'm just not hearing it the right way, but as you guys are talking through, if you realize again how much even now you're talking about us, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that has been for so many years ingrained in you to where, and again, I think, going back to what we mentioned, there was this spouse, friend of ours who married somebody, a vet with post-traumatic stress. And, and her thing was, sort of along the lines of this thing, again, how can I best support him? And Lisa, I think you answered that a little bit, of this idea of you can't fix anything, right? Mm-hmm. But what about you? What about you? Taking care of yourself? Because you haven't, I've been trying to ask that question a little bit. But again, your military training is pushing forward, and
it's a bit of a foreign concept.
Yeah,
it really is, and so it's something that we're still struggling with how to do that.
Okay.
And I know that, in any relationship, any marriage, military or not, we have to take care of ourselves so that then we have something to give others. We have to love ourselves to love others. The Bible says that. And but it's easier to say than it is to do, especially when you have family members who are hurting and you're used to playing that role, that supportive role. But I think we are just starting to get to that. I think one of the things that I discovered as I was looking for things to help our family and to specifically help Tim, I found organizations that provide resources for the spouses specifically. I've actually gone to a retreat for spouses through Wounded Warrior Project. We have a retreat coming up for spouses also through the Mighty Oaks organization. And these are great because they focus specifically on spouse issues, and you have a whole group of people who are in the same boat that you can feel free to talk, and you do come home feeling like you're not alone, which is a big thing, and then somewhat rejuvenated to keep fighting the good fight. So, I think those are just, that's a start.
Gotcha.
I don't know what to add to that other than I think as women, I don't know how to say this in a way that won't offend somebody, but we are made with maternal instincts, and we are made to take care, and that's just our MO. That's just the direction we go in. We take care of our kids. And so when our husbands come home and we know that in some way they're broken, because you can't go through that and not be broken. We're trying to do what we can to take care of our husbands, and unfortunately we end up enabling them to stay right where they're at, as opposed to dealing with the dark stuff that you got to deal with, because there is no way around a problem. There's only a way through. That's it. So I feel like that's a hard baton to hand off, of being that caregiver and trying to encourage. It's very hard to hand that over and allow, because we don't want to see you hurt, but also, you know what? It means a lot of stuff we got to work through too. It's a protective, yet I don't know how to say it any other way, but the point being is that it's tough. It's not easy. Sometimes the easy way is to enable you to stay right where you're at. Mm-hmm. It's easier to deal with the maladaptation, if you will, to normal life than it is to open up that can of worms and talk about each individual thing that has contributed to the PTSD. Mm-hmm. So
I'll agree with you on that. Yeah.
And I don't like conflict.
Oh, me either.
I really don't like conflict, right. And I'm not good at resolving it. And I think Tim would admit that he's not either.
Yeah.
And so you have to sharpen those communication skills that you've been able to kind of avoid up till then because you're apart so much. Yeah. And that is one of the things that I think some of these good organizations are helping with, is helping you to be able to talk through things and work through things and how to have fun together again and get to know each other again. When you spend half your marriage apart and each of you are changing along the way, you do have to kind of spend some time getting to know each other again.
How are my conflict solving skills?
No answer. Okay. I'm not going to answer that.
Smart. I think I've gotten better at least telling you what's on my mind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if there's, let's sort of wrap up, but I want you guys, because again, the goal, at least I think, and again, this goal might be off, but if somebody's listening right now, maybe a spouse of somebody who has either still in the midst of things, just got done with it, or has been out for a while and things are rough. What would you say to them?
You're not alone.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're definitely not alone. And there is hope. There is healing. There are some steps that have to be taken, but there is certainly a light at the end of the tunnel. You just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other.
Are those footsteps easy?
No, definitely not. Not easy. But finding someone that you can talk to, taking advantage of the resources that are out there for us. And for me personally, my faith
prayer
is the biggest thing. For me, getting through and having a positive attitude and persevering, even when it's hard. I couldn't do it without that personally. But yes, you're not alone, and just keep fighting the good fight.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I would definitely say wherever you're at, find a good organization. Like, find people who are in the same, who have experienced the same you have. Other spouses. There are other spouses out there who you could, you can talk to them straight up and tell them everything you're going through, and they understand. They can totally empathize. Whether it's a spouse of a military veteran who's got PTSD, whether it's another traumatic experience for someone who maybe wasn't in the military, but you also recognize that they also need to work through some things, and you just need to be a part of a community that can help lift you up and help support you. We were made to be in community, whatever that looks like. And sometimes it may not be someone who's walked the same walk as you, but it might be someone that is as close to you as a best friend or something. And while you can't explain and tell them about the exact experience, you can talk about the things that are going on as far as the results of those experiences, i.e. they've got anger, like your spouse has got anger stored up, then what can I do to help him work through, or her work through that? But it's going to take effort But you do, just like Matt said, you have to take care of yourself before you can take care of the spouse that, or the person that you care for that's hurting, because you can't give what you don't have. So I think that's probably the first step I would recommend. And the second step would be just, a prayer. Prayer is my first step, but, and not just for the person who's hurting, but for yourself. Insofar as like Lisa was saying, I can't handle this, Lord, whoever, I can't handle this, Lord. I need you to help me today and give me some hope that this situation, but yeah, there is healing that can be had, but it does have to be a concerted effort, not only for the spouse, but also for the person who has experienced the PTS.
In regards to faith, just because this is a cool story, Lisa, you started going to then Savannah Christian, right? In 2001? Two.
Mm-hmm.
You were
2002.
Gotcha. And so, and then Tim, he came back mid 2002,
Yes.
gave his life to Christ, right?
Yeah. Well, he had already given his life to Christ years before, but he joined me. I started going to Savannah Christian on my own while he was deployed. And then he joined me there Memorial Day service.
That's right.
Yeah. And it was just something tangible that we both felt the Holy Spirit, and we both rededicated our lives to Christ after that.
Yeah.
So we grew up knowing Jesus and knowing about God and the Bible and our faith, but I don't think we truly understood and lived that life out until after that.
Yeah. Just an incredible thing. And it's to see to where all of us are now, and just incredible. Thankful for that. Thankful for the grace that we've been given for that. All right. So any other final thoughts? I'm going to, one last sort of, something you're like, I really wish I could say this, or there doesn't have to be, but there can be.
Keep your chin up.
Keep your chin up. All right. Yeah. And I'll put a link to the Wounded Warrior program, because I know Tim's talked a lot about that as well. The one that you went on as spouses, but also, you got to go on one just for, or you guys wanted one as a couple, right?
We did.
And then you've also been on one as a spouse. And,
yes.
And we'll also, a plug for Mighty Oaks. That was the program that Tim and I went to back in March. And then you guys are signed up to go in July, which hopefully that you'll be able to with all the social distancing stuff.
I just want to add to that, if you are going through this, a similar situation, don't keep it secret. Talk to somebody. There are people out there who genuinely care and want to help you walk through it. Whether you're the PTSD person, or you're the caregiver of that person, or someone that just really cares for them, just there are resources out there.
Yeah.
And all you got to do is find them.
Yeah.
And hopefully through like the different links that you've put on the podcast, that people can go from there, and they might have more links and more links and more links. But the only way, like I said, the only way to solve a problem is to go through it. So just be proactive and go.
I agree. I think a lot of people can look at some of these things as weakness or brokenness, but it takes so much courage and strength to persevere through these things. And Tim was my hero when we met, and he was training, and he is even more my hero today, knowing what he's been through and his unwillingness to give up, even when things have been way harder than we ever dreamed. And so, it takes a lot of courage.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And also, for specifically to both of you, I mean, yes, you guys have demonstrated incredible amounts of courage. To the Denton family as a whole, the same thing. And again, I've told Tim recently, just in the past, probably, 6 months, probably about 6 months ago, he's doing some of the most courageous things that he could be doing,
Yes.
even though it's the hardest as well. And so, and it's inspiring to me. And I know, our stories hopefully, again, can be inspiring to others, so we don't see, because obviously things can, and we know people where things have gotten a lot worse. And so, so hopefully, other people will be able to see this podcast. I pray that, and again, other Night Stalker spouses or just military spouses, again, if they're feeling discouraged, and again, if anything, hey, wow, I'm not as messed up as I thought I was, or, maybe messed up is normal, right?
It is.
And it's, and it is good for us to still be able to laugh and have a sense of humor, I think, sometimes with this. But ladies, I am so thankful to have you both here. Obviously, some people might say, wait, you brought your wife on? Boy, that was, but it's all good. And to have you here, Lisa, as well. And, and for Tim to be supportive of it. Again, I'm so thankful.
It was my pleasure.
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah. So for the listeners also, I mentioned it last week. This is the last episode we're going to be doing, episode 12, probably for summer or through summer. I want to take some time over the next couple of months to see sort of what the next set of shows are going to look like. I plan to post some little maybe short videos on the channel as we go forward. But, we're excited to see. I'm excited the fact that we've made it through 12 episodes and the response has been really great. And again, it's not about me. It's not about the number of likes we're getting, but, some of the messages that we've been getting from, like we've talked about, other spouses, other veterans, and just some of the hope that this message has been providing. So until we meet again, whether that's towards the end of the summer, or maybe, again, a couple little things here and there. Again, thanks for listening and be part of the show. We'll see you later.